Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar today. My name is Brittany Herman. I'm a marketing specialist here at Aktion Associates, and I'll be moderating today's event. The audience is muted today to provide the best user experience possible, so please use the Q&A feature if you have a question today. Our presenters will be able to answer them at the end of today's session. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends today as well. Lastly, we are joined by our presenters, Mike Kaufman and Steve Rogers today, who will be our lovely presenters. All right, let's go into today's agenda. Went over the quick introductions, then we'll be going into what is cybersecurity insurance, who needs cybersecurity insurance and why, the common policy requirements and coverages, and then how Aktion can help you with all of that. And then lastly, like I mentioned, we will go into that Q&A. So at this time, I want to hand it over to our presenters today.
Great.
Fantastic.
Why don't I start just introduction-wise? I'm Steve Rogers. I'm project executive here at Aktion Associates, and my colleague.
I'm Mike Kaufman. I'm the vice president of our managed infrastructure and cloud services division, we're really excited to welcome all of you to our presentation here in the prime of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. October is a great time to focus on cybersecurity issues and awareness. We've been planning this for some time, and as we kind of lined up potential topics, we found one that we thought did a good job of encompassing a lot of other more granular cybersecurity issues and requirements and needs, while addressing kind of a larger concern that we see in a lot of the Aktion customer base. Yeah, and that has to do with cybersecurity insurance and the need to obtain it, to keep it, and to remain compliant with the requirements. So I think probably it makes sense to kick off here with just kind of an intro as to what cybersecurity insurance is, and we'll talk about some of the things that it covers and some of the things that it doesn't, and why we really think that it's an important piece of an overall comprehensive cybersecurity strategy for an organization of any size.
Indeed. So let me lead off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll lead off here with our first set of issues related to what cybersecurity insurance is. So there are several aspects to cybersecurity issues that insurance can protect you against. So things like data breaches. So a lot of companies that might have databases with information that would be very bad if it got out. Data breach, being able to deal with data breaches and the response to a data breach in many industries is a big deal. So if you have a loss of data, or if you can verify that data has been lost, and you can almost assume any real cybersecurity that may be the case, and you have to plan for it. But it covers the costs of notifying individuals or companies that you have had a breach. Can cover legal expenses, regulatory expenses if you're subject to any kind of regulation due to cybersecurity incidents. Can cover the cost of forensic investigations to help you figure out how the cyber criminal got in and what they potentially stole when they got in. And it also can help with a PR effort as you communicate with and notify people who may have had their information exposed through a breach.
And so we've had folks come to us, immediately after discovering that they had been breached and ask for help from us, right? Folks that weren't necessarily engaged with all of our security solutions, that found that we've had a business email compromise, or we had ransomware begin to encrypt some of the critical data on one of our servers, and these follow-up actions, they were pretty expensive right off the bat. I mean, in even small incursions, we've seen those costs be in the tens of thousands of dollars. So certainly having protection against unexpected costs like that in the form of insurance is probably a good idea. Other things that can be covered: business interruption. You can't do business because your database or your software is no longer working because it's been encrypted or tied up by some type of malware. or the actual fees that you might have to pay in order to get your data back or to get your systems back under your own control. And not every policy will cover all of these items. This is a kind of a special clause typically because it can be pretty exorbitant. If you follow the news at all, you probably are familiar with some of the bigger breaches. We'll cover some of those, I don't want to say exciting, but some of those dramatic fees here and some of those breaches here a little later in the presentation. Third-party liability. So if you have to deal with maybe a third party, you're hosting or you have a piece of functionality within your own networks for someone else, their own losses may be on the table as well. So, and then you've got other policies that can, if you have erroneous wire transfers, this is a pretty common sort of act that the cyber criminals will try to get an organization to wire payroll to the new bank, the criminal's account, and abscond with those funds as quickly as they can, or maybe they perform some other type of bank fraud. So other policies with special clauses can cover those types of losses as well, and all of those feed into the cost of the insurance premium, like you might expect.
So what cybersecurity insurance is not. So there are certain things you have to be aware of for your cyber insurance policy to be effective. One is many policies require you to maintain best practices, and if with a checklist of things that you need to do in order to qualify. If you are not truthful when you answer those, or you don't keep those up to date, that could invalidate your policy. And insurance companies are notorious for looking for reasons not to pay the benefits of the policy. So known vulnerabilities, intentional acts. So things where an intentional act, if it's not covered in your policy, when I say intentional act, it could be an ex-employee damaging something inside your organization prior to their leaving. You want to make sure something like that is covered. So you need to look at exclusions in your policy. But other things like war, terrorism, acts of nation states, many times you'll see clauses excluding those kinds of issues. And I love this one, prior incidents or breaches. It's kind of like, I'm going to go get some house insurance after my house is burned down and expect the insurance company to pay me for it. And yeah, well, that same is true in cyber insurance. If you've had a breach and then you go buy insurance, they're not going to pay you for a previous breach. Anyway, so other things like they might not pay for loss of reputation or brand value. You could go through some severe brand damage from this, but that's something, an intangible that they're probably not going to cover.
So there are a lot of things that can impact a business in terms of cybersecurity, and cyber threats are constantly evolving. And I think this is a good spot for us to talk about who needs cybersecurity insurance. And I think Steve and I, would want to communicate that every organization that has data on a network should consider some form of cybersecurity insurance. It is a piece of a fully mature cybersecurity strategy, and we've had discussions with companies of all sizes, really, but in particular, smaller and medium-sized businesses can fall prey to the thinking that, hey, I'm not big enough to be on a hacker's radar. Why would someone target me? Why would they target our data when there are such bigger fish to fry out there? And the answer to that really is that the pivot, the focus of cybersecurity or cyber criminals activity has really shifted in the past few years from those big high-value targets to low-hanging fruit. So the folks that think that they won't be a target are less inclined to invest in their own cybersecurity measures. As a result, their data is much easier to steal, compromise, encrypt, and ransom than some of those larger organizations who have seen, hey, we're probably a high-value target. We were going to invest significantly in our cybersecurity strategy. All of a sudden, they're not as attractive a target for a cyber criminal as someone who's got some critical data that they can't run without, but that hasn't invested in those same types of cybersecurity measures. So the same is true of the insurance. It's something that we think that everybody should invest in. Provides financial protection, just like we say that backup and disaster recovery is a key piece of a good cybersecurity strategy. So it's the information store of last resort. So too, covering the financial basis with insurance is a really key piece of what you can do here to protect yourself and your organization.
So when you consider all of the threats that are out there, these are some really interesting things to know and understand about why you need to worry. So we're not trying to scare you to death, but this is, I mean, it is interesting. The United States is #1 for cyber attacks. Now, we have our own theory about why that's the case, because US-based businesses tend to have money. And we have a lot of businesses. So, and many of them are small, medium businesses, as Mike said, that are maybe unprotected, as not as much as a Fortune 500 company would be protected. So small businesses, as you can see from this, well over half of the businesses that suffer from these attacks are small businesses. Many companies that really aren't prepared, where their internal infrastructure, their data, their servers are compromised, that can't be recovered. 60% of those go out of business within 6 months of a breach like this. You can't get to your financial data, you can't recover it, and you can't operate your business that's so dependent on computer systems. That's a big deal. We find that a very large percentage of breaches are due to human error. An employee clicking on something they shouldn't click on. There's just a number of ways that a cyber criminal can get through to you. And it's usually based on an employee not understanding how important this is and clicking on something that's so realistic looking that they click on it anyway. So if you look at some of the costs, the experts are thinking that worldwide, 10.5 trillion, the cost of cybercrime by 2025. Stolen credentials are a huge deal and a big part of cybersecurity breaches. If a criminal can get someone's credentials and log it either into your network or into your web accounts, the cost of something like that can be astronomical. We see many companies that where they haven't had a breach will find that they've had a cyber criminal lurking around their network for months before any damage is done, while they learn the ins and outs of the network and where their attacks can provide the most return value to that criminal. The cost of ransomware, so just ransomware itself, projected to reach $265 billion by 2031. And the largest ransomware attack to date was the Royal Mail hack in just this past year for $80 million in one ransomware attack. Supply chain attacks are becoming more common. So that is where you may have vendors, customers that you deal with. A breach in your organization may lead to a breach in other organizations, and that's an increasing threat you all need to be aware of.
4,000 ransomware attacks occur every day, and the story of how this has become a business is really shocking. Back in the early days of ransomware, the ubiquitous image for someone executing ransomware was a guy in a darkened room wearing a hoodie, and that's kind of what our culture is associated with these hackers. But in truth, these have become businesses. They have giant call centers where folks are operating, some of these ransomware networks. You can rent ransomware as a service to try to infect or otherwise extort money from businesses that you might be able to get into. The long and short of it is that this has become an industry, and as a result, it's become, because of the amount of money involved, it's become organized, and it's become, in many cases, something that's very effective at infiltrating, past even moderate cybersecurity measures to gain access to critical data and to put it at risk. Average downtime 16 days. I can only imagine, being impacted for 16 days and not able to execute, what it would do to the brand, what it would do to just the sheer loss of profits, whether you're a construction company that can't get invoices out, whether you're a distribution company that can't, pick, pack, and ship during that time. How would clients be impacted? How are you going to cover that loss? Both of the business itself and then of all of the follow-on activities that are needed to recover. Insurance is a key piece of that. This really hurts my heart that even if you pay, that doesn't guarantee that the same people that got onto the network in the first place didn't leave something there to get you again. Average global cost to remediate a single attack, and this includes some of those big ones, the 80 mil that Steve talked about earlier skews the scale, but average cost, in real terms is $761,000. A lot of these criminals are succeeding in their attempts to get through. Not 73% of attempts, but 73% of the people that are working at this do succeed in some of the cases that they put out there. When we talk in terms of a database record, $146 per record. That's every transaction, every customer record, every piece of data that you might need to get back. And then the really scary thing is that personally identifiable information. So, if your database has card information, social security numbers, probably doesn't have that for most of the folks on the call today, but card information is potentially likely. Maybe there are some, just address, names, those types of things. You've probably seen companies that have been breached in the past have to shell out for some kind of identity protection for those that were affected by the breach, maybe a year or maybe longer after the breach itself. And there's a lot of cost associated with that as well. So a lot going on in the cyber landscape today and things to be protected against.
Right. So a lot of things that, and we while we touched on this earlier, the things that you should consider when choosing an insurance policy. You want to look at coverage limits. You want to look at deductibles, policy exclusions, breach response services premiums, ensure reputation and financial strength. And that can be a big one because if in the event of a cyber breach, if you have your insurance company is not viable, you might as well not have the insurance. But you want to find somebody that's a right fit for your organization. Look at the items that they cover, the items they exclude, the requirements to stay covered, and that you want to look at that as a total package to make sure you've implemented the cybersecurity policies that will keep you insured in the event of a breach. And one thing about what Mike went over on the last slide is it's not just the cost of a breach is not just the ransom you might have to pay. It's remediating and recovering your network and restoring your servers and just all the services surrounding cleaning up the mess that gets left behind, even if you do pay a ransom. If you don't pay a ransom, just recovering backups, getting your business back up and running can be a very expensive proposition. So the total cost of a breach is not of a ransomware can go way beyond just the cost of ransom.
And ransomware is not always realistically just about whether or not you get your data back, but in some cases it's about whether the folks that stole it will publish it somewhere as well. You may pay to keep it private if need be. So there's a lot. Oh, I went one slide too many. I'll slide right back. So here's the meat of today's presentation. Really, it's what do you need to do, if you see value, as we do in cybersecurity, cybersecurity liability insurance, what do you need to do to make sure that you can get a policy issued and that you stay compliant so that if you need to, you make a claim against the policy, you've met the requirements and the insurance company will pay. So a lot of insurance policies, and we've done some really cool things with aggregating some of the requirements from different insurance companies that are insuring some of the Aktion clients to put together some assessments. But some of the things that we see on these are: do you need to have an official formal cybersecurity risk assessment every year? Do you need to have specific policies and product procedures in place to protect your organization. Those range, Steve used to give a really great presentation on the 12 pillars of cybersecurity and the things that you need to do to protect your organization. But things like firewalls, endpoint protection, detection and response, password management, spam filters, phishing filters, and a really key one, awareness training, cybersecurity awareness training for your employees to make sure that they can recognize a suspicious email or they can recognize a phishing attempt, someone trying to harvest their credentials for business email compromise. Controls and best practices. Do you have written policy? Are you sharing that with your employees? The incident response plan. What do you do if it does happen? Are you ready to minimize the downtime? Are you ready to be as continuous a business as possible in the event that you're breached? What preparations have you made on the front end to minimize the cost of an incursion? And then, of course, as we talked about earlier, that last security safety net, data backup and recovery. Make sure you've got that in a place that's not attached to your network and not potentially vulnerable to the same thing that could compromise the production data. So, and if you don't do all these things and the insurance company requires it when you go to make a claim, it could be denied. So a key piece of the whole process.
Yeah, and I want to tell just a 1-minute story here on that topic. We had a customer based out of Richmond, Virginia, that had multiple locations, but they were a contractor, I think 600 employees. They had a breach where the cyber criminal got into their network. And it's one of those cases where they weren't trying to ransom it. They were trying to destroy the company. They spent several weeks poking around. No one knew they were doing it. They found the location of all their backups. The first thing they did was wipe out all of their backups. And then they started encrypting all their data, all their servers, their phone server, everything. The company was completely shut down, except for being able to use cell phones. Couldn't access their software. It was a major. Now, we were not protecting that company. We heard about it. They enlisted our help to try our best to help them recover their accounting software. But that's the kind of story you never want to hear. You never want to get that phone call saying, hey, we've been breached. And so this data protection, backup and disaster recovery, Mike is very good there. You need to implement that with best practices. So if you do have a compromise, that there is a somewhere that is completely inaccessible to these cyber criminals, so they can't erase one of those remote backups, unlike this customer that we had that suffered through that. Okay. So as Mike mentioned, we have in the past done a thing called our 12 pillars of cybersecurity. This is kind of a little bit of a takeoff on that. And what we mean by that is there are a number of tools and policies and tools and softwares and other things that will help you really protect your company. These pillars and the categories are, the beginning here is endpoint security, next generation, anti-malware, where it provides 0-day protection. The old days of antivirus with pattern file downloads is long gone. If you have any of those old versions, you need to consider replacing them with these next gen endpoint security tools. And the 0-day protection looks for things like ransomware behavior. Here's a behavior that the kind of things they'll look for. Are you phoning home to an IP address in Kazakhstan to get an encryption key? And then are you then updating files and encrypting them? These next-gen programs can detect that behavior and shut it down to protect you before it completely destroys your business. So, so that's one area. Gateway security, i.e. next-gen firewalls. If you have a 10-year-old firewall, you definitely need to look into replacing it with a next-gen firewall. Email protection. So many spam filters. You want to get a best-in-class spam filter that provides the ability to not just reduce spam, but to scan for bad web links and bad attachments that could cause a problem. That will go a long way towards protecting you, including some phishing, but we have another one for phishing that we'll talk about. anti-phishing. Computer patch management is another big deal. Most of the time when you have a compromise, an employee clicks on a link, and this little piece of software will look for known vulnerabilities that they can then use to compromise your network. You have to patch all of your computers to prevent that. It also means you need to be on current operating systems. This month, Windows Server 2012 R2 goes off support with Microsoft. For example, if you have servers running that operating system or earlier, or Windows 7, or Windows 8 or 8.1, those systems are now out of support with Microsoft and will become, over time, more and more vulnerable to security breaches. Data protection, you have to have a great backup and disaster recovery solution in place with on-premise, but off-site backups that can't be reached through normal methods. Identity protection, and this is, many of you may have already seen this, where if you have to use your smartphone, you're logging into a site and then you have to put in a code or approve it on your smartphone to prove you are who you say you are. So multi-factor authentication is becoming a requirement on cyber insurance companies. And next slide, Mike.
Sure. So, hey, I'll jump in and cover a few of these. So password security. And while multi-factor authentication is becoming an added layer to the login process to protect the identity of folks that are accessing corporate data and corporate resources, password management is a really important thing as well. I'll talk about the dark web here in just a minute. Sounds so ominous, and it kind of is. But one thing that you need to be aware of is that without some visibility into repeated passwords or passwords that have been, found to be compromised, there's a potential that someone could, and we've seen it happen, use the same password at several critical sites, and that means that if they're compromised at a single site, smart cyber criminals are going to attempt those at some of the sites that are most lucrative and see if they can log in with the same credentials and potentially gain access to key resources, financial data, banking transactions, those types of things. Phishing protection is really important. There are products out there that recognize the type of language or the type of images that might be included in an email that's attempting to solicit some type of behavior or to harvest credentials and protect against those, and also allow your savvy employees to report that an email appears to be a phishing attempt and have it pull out of everyone's inboxes to protect your organization as a whole. Phishing protection is a great tool. User education, I talked about this a little bit earlier, security awareness training, letting folks know how they should be suspicious, what to check if they think something smells off, and then also so that you can run attack simulations. Send a fake phishing email into the inbox of all your users, and then find out who's the weakest link, who do we need to help get a little bit of remedial education so that they can pass these types of tests in the future and ensure that your organization is less at risk for that type of compromise. Dark web monitoring. So the dark web is really a marketplace accessed through special routers, encrypted routers, through encrypted nodes, where stolen credentials and data are bought and sold. And also, I mentioned earlier, you can rent out ransomware. This would be a good place to make a contact to do that, please. Hopefully none of you are thinking about getting into the cybercrime industry, but this is a place where, huge databases, compromised information are sold. And when those databases are recovered, they go into another database that then is checked for compromised credentials. So if your login is your email, you can run checks through dark web monitoring and dark web scanning to find out if that email address is associated with any password that's been recovered from one of these stolen databases. And you can implement a process or a solution that periodically checks to ensure that no additional credentials have been found, and if they have, that you're taking every step to ensure that that those have been changed or remediated. content protection. And those of you who are running, Windows 11 on a laptop may have seen the option to use BitLocker to encrypt disks in the event that the laptop is physically stolen. That protects the data on it from being compromised or otherwise ransomed by bad actors. And then of course threat detection. So Steve talked earlier about the endpoint protection. Threat detection is very similar. But it's not just on a single laptop or PC type of device. This is across the organization, looking in logs from firewalls, from managed switches, from everything that touches the network to find, is there any suspicious activity? And if there is, what can we do to mitigate it? How do we escalate to someone to address what might be a developing situation in the network? So a lot of great areas of security focus.
So one of the services that Aktion offers, and many of our customers have taken advantage of this, is a risk assessment. And that is using some of the knowledge we've gained over the years, working with multiple insurance companies with our clients who come to us and say, hey, can you help me fill out this questionnaire to make sure we can be covered? So we've gained a lot of experience with that and understand what the insurance companies require. So part of what we can do is either help you with those questionnaires, but more importantly, look at your cybersecurity footprint to make sure that you have the right tools in place and the right policies and procedures and backups and all of the things that go into making your company safe and secure and insurable by a cyber insurance company. And that's really what this assessment is all about. We'd love to talk to you about that if you are so inclined.
So, in addition to that, we have adopted the CIS V8 framework for cybersecurity. And what this is basically it's a set of rules, policies, they call them controls, that allow us to make smart decisions about our own cybersecurity posture, and then also to help our customers make smart decisions about theirs. So what's nice is that it's been developed so that you have sort of an industry accepted level of security, based on your compliance, based on your ability to deploy a lot of the products and solutions that we just went through. You have met the requirements of the controls, and you can say, I have maintained, or I have achieved the security level of implementation group 1 or implementation group 2 or 3, and that way you have sort of an absolute industry standard to talk about. This is how secure my business is. This is how I get a grade or a score, and I can talk about this with the insurance company as well. So there are a number of different frameworks out there. CIS V8 we think fits very nicely into the needs of the majority of Aktion clients. But there are higher and more robust frameworks as well for those of you who may be doing government contract work or DoD affiliation. They have these the CMMC framework. There's the NIST framework. There's a whole bunch of those. We selected this one, and we're actually building a really nice managed security services practice to complement our managed services practice. So for those customers who want to take the next step and really get some protection around their network and infrastructure, this is something that we'll be able to help them implement.
Yeah, and I think, so most of you on the call today know who Aktion is, but we're well known in the world of software systems for construction, distribution, and manufacturing with Acumatica. We are a Dell Tech partner for architects and engineers. We're an Infor partner for distribution, wholesale distribution companies. And we are a Sage partner in the world of construction and real estate. We bring a lot of expertise within these industries, and our division, the MIX for short, Managed Infrastructure and Cloud Services division, our role is to help our customers with all of their internal IT processes, including cloud services, managed services, and now security services. So that's what we're all about, and we are very proud of those associations and our industry knowledge. We don't try to be all things to everybody in every industry. So having that industry focus is a big deal for us.
Agreed, Steve. So some of the things that we offer, we have two data centers. Some of you may be hosting with us already, but if you run an on-premise deployment of your ERP today, chances are we've got a great fit for you for an intermediate step to the cloud by moving that workload into one of the Aktion data centers. We have one right outside of Toledo in our headquarters and one in Charlotte. We offer managed services, so monitoring and management of a lot of the items that we talked about earlier, patching, anti-malware, anti-spam and anti-phishing, and we provide endpoint and end user support for IT type of requests through our managed services. We also have hybrid services, which is where we handle both a cloud deployment of your ERP and we handle some of that endpoint support. Security services we talked about here a little bit, but we also we do sell infrastructure, endpoints, servers, storage, software licensing. We have a really nice Microsoft 365 practice where we can help you with licensing for that. We can help you with deployment and architecture of Teams and SharePoint environments, and of course, Steve, myself have long loved the practice of sitting down and discussing IT matters strategically with our customers and those who've engaged. So we do some of that consulting as well.
And we have, I think we are very proud of some of the recognition that we get. So Aktion is one of the top 100 VARs across the U.S. VAR is a value-added reseller, and those are companies that provide ongoing software, consulting, IT services. That value-added reseller is our general industry classification. And as you can see here, we have made top billing across many recognizable names in the industry. Counting today, Bob Scott's top 100 VARs, Computer Reseller News. It's actually called the Channel Company now, but top MSP, top solution provider, fast growth, and one of the top places to work. So we have Aktion is a great company. We have more than 220 employees, 6,500 customers spread across all parts of the United States. And I can't say enough about it, having been associated with Aktion now for the last almost 14 years.
Okay, so Steve and I, we ran a little longer than we expected in the presentation segment of our of today's webinar. That happens sometimes. We get together. We like to talk about this.
We're so passionate that we can't shut up.
It's true. So
all right. I do see a question here. I can read it out to both of you. That way, whoever can take it wants to. The question is, how do you work to decide the scope?
How do we work to decide the scope? Well, I mean, I guess I'd address that by saying, typically, if we're engaging, I guess the answer varies a little bit. If we're engaging, as a follow-up to some type of incident, or if we're, just kind of sitting down with someone to talk through, hey, where are you today, and where do you need to be? I guess I'd say we have a couple of ways to do that. One is we can sort of take the cybersecurity insurance readiness assessment that we've developed and run through that with a potential, someone who's looking to improve their cybersecurity posture and improve their ability to get and to maintain a cybersecurity insurance policy. And we'll uncover areas where there are gaps or weaknesses, and then talk through solutions that we offer, and also talk through other potential available solutions. But to sit down and really run through the complete list of questions that we've been asked over the past 3 or so years that we've been collecting is a great place to start. Alternatively, if we're going to look at adherence to that cybersecurity framework, we can start with that set of controls as well. It's a little bit different perspective because it's I guess a little more pure approach to cybersecurity rather than managing to a specific policy or insurance provider. but we certainly can sit down and talk through the areas of need and requirement to be compliant, and then determine, what size organization and what level of compliance might be needed, and then help them get there.
All right. And I do see one more question coming in, so I will also read that out for you guys. Just asking, how do you suggest reiterating the importance of password management solutions when execs may not see that value?
One of the interesting, I can respond if you don't mind. One of the interesting things you could ask any employee is, how many times have they reused the same password at multiple sites? Because people in general hate memorizing more than 1 or 2 passwords because they can't do it. You have one favorite password, they get reused over and over and over again, and that's very dangerous. So the importance of these password management solutions, especially in the world of web, the websites that require logins, and there are many of them, when you reuse passwords, you're definitely at risk. So that's really kind of what I would say. Yeah.
I'd like to add to that, Steve.
Sure.
If I were in the position of trying to convince leadership that a password management solution were something of high importance, I would probably engage with someone who could do one of those dark web scans for me. Use the domain for my company's email and find out how many credentials using corporate email have been compromised, that I can just show in a quick report. A lot of times that is a great way to demonstrate that, hey, they're out there, they've compromised us, and here's some visibility into how we might have been impacted. Are these changed? When did these occur? When were these recovered? What are we doing to protect ourselves? A password management solution is a key piece strategy to prevent this type of dark web scan. I mean, I'm sure it's a scam in some way, but this type of dark web scan from us showing up there in a way that really puts our business at risk.
And I would add one more thing, and that would be, look at your cybersecurity requirements, especially the questionnaires. If they have a requirement for it, all you need to do is point to it. Look, we want to get cyber insurance, we have to do it. Right.
Exactly. Good question.
All right. At this time, I don't see any more questions. So, and if you do have an extra question after the session ends, feel free to you're more than willing to reach out to me. There will be emails at the end of this PowerPoint, or even to your account manager. We're more than happy to get your questions answered.
Hey, I'd just like to say thanks everybody for joining us. I know some of this content, dare I say, was a little spooky here in in our Cybersecurity Awareness Month of October, but we really do appreciate you spending some time with us. I hope that you found some value in our content. And yes, Steve and I would welcome further questions or outreach. If there's something that we can do to help you as you work through these processes, please do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, and with that, I will tell everyone, have a great day, and thank you for attending.